Laat ik mezelf even voorstellen. Mark op de Weegh, Nederlandse achtergrond. Maar de laatste 20 jaar ben ik in de Verenigde Staten geweest. En daar heb ik ook veel gewerkt met CO2-opslag. Ik ben sinds september verleden jaar bij IBM begonnen. Om eigenlijk vooral met een Nederlands oog en ook doel om CO2-opslag mogelijk te maken. En daarbij hoop ik eigenlijk ook met dit verhaal een voorbeeld te geven hoe we met een bepaalde samenwerking die mogelijkheid van CO2-opslag in de Nederlandse aardbodem kunnen realiseren. Maar ook om die verbintening te maken wil ik eigenlijk gewoon omslaan. Want als ik de Nederlandse toepassing ga maken van CCS, Carbon Capture and Sequestration, dan vertaalt dat heel erg niet zo goed in het Nederlands. Dus ik ga ook nu de omslag maken naar het Engels, om ook hopelijk later dit verhaal te kunnen uitgeven naar mensen die niet zo goed in het Nederlands zijn. Dus I'm going to switch. I'm going to do it in English, also because most of the presentations are in English. So why do we want to work together? And that's where pretty much the whole balloons, water, the risk that is associated with that comes into the connection of CO2 injection and storage. Because it's something new. It's a new process. We haven't done it, or at least not with the uniqueness that comes with each storage complex. Because as we recognize in the oil and gas industry, each oil and gas field is unique and you need a fit-for-purpose solution with it. That is the same with CO2 storage, as you need a fit-for-purpose solution to enable injection, but also, which is even more important, to know when you should not inject, because not every field is suitable for CO2 injection. And then there are, of course, if you look at the onion, there are several layers of challenges. And first of all, we are going to apply learnings from the E&P world to CCS. So with that, the first unique challenge is that we have to think contra. So invert everything. We have to actually think from downstream to upstream when our current processes are from upstream to downstream. So with that, we would like to apply already the tools that we have in our toolbox, but we have to adapt them to the uniqueness and the challenges and the risk management or the risk profiles that comes with CO2 storage. Now, with that as well, we can capture it. We have ways of storing it because it has been done before, but we have to do it safely, and we have to make sure that there is also a profit model by it, because that is one of the value drivers of the current stakeholders. So with that overall challenge, you've got several questions. And first of all, why? And I will address that as well. Who? It's us. How, what, when, and where. That is actually then going into the processes and the systems that we have to integrate and link to make that CO2 storage possible. Now, why are these balloons here is real simple. We have always utilized in the underground the hydrocarbons, and we've slowly depleted them in our depleted gas fields. And now, when they are coming in the end of their life cycle, we have a key question: please use CO2 and put it back into the balloon. And that is, of course, something like, we didn't really actually build it for that. So, is this unique storage opportunity suitable? No, it's not. It doesn't want to store. Is this one suitable? I'd rather not, because we know what the consequences are. We're going to lose the CO2. Is this one suitable? No. And that is also kind of the risk profile. Most fields are not suitable for CO2 storage. And then I come to my last one, and of course I'm going to be really close. Is this one suitable? Yes, it is. Can I do it safely? Yes, I have designed for it. I have the integrity, and I know where the CO2 is going to go, and I know how long it's going to take, and I've got models for it. Now, the good challenge is Do my models actually incorporate what I actually think is going to happen? Yes, it does. Can I actually store it safely? Yes, we have P&A plans to safely do this, and we know where it's going to be for the next 1,000 years. That's the challenge. So why do we want to work together on that? It's because we need actually to integrate our systems. And that comes back to the main question, why do we want to do that? We have a climate change, and we need a solution. So we have value drivers from the Paris Agreement, European climate law, Nederlands Klimaatakkoord, de wet, de plan, but also as well EBN's mission, focus, strategy, and the CC opportunities that comes with it. Because it's a particular role and responsibility that we have, but we have to work together with our stakeholders. And we can do that together with the emitters, persons that are involved with transport, the regulator, the state, because if you really think at the end of mind, we have to later on, if we have safely stored this CO2, give it back to the state and say, we've done that in the most safe way, and it's not going to go somewhere where we don't think it's going to go. So with that, we need to put tools in place right now to manage the asset and to manage the project. And with that, we will come up with best practices, learnings, but especially one of the learnings that we already have in the E&P industry is process safety. And we have to apply that here as well, so we prevent the larger risks that are associated with CO2 injection. Now, how do we do that? Now, we've got, with that, already tools. EBN had that as well, and a lot of persons will recognize kind of a ways of working that will answer the questions of how, what, when, and where that we do in the project development process. It is then linked to deeper layers to each function and standards and lessons learned, but also criteria that we have to apply that will ensure that the deliverables that are associated with CO2 storage are actually going to be provided in the most transparent way. And with that, you need control points for each discipline and each function, so that you really can say, okay, yeah, my wells, my subsurface, flow assurance, facilities, we all can address these key questions from an overall perspective and apply process safety. With that as well, and you saw it also in the previous presentations, there are key questions to each element. And most of the storages can actually answer these questions and these elements that are associated with capacity, containment, well integrity, how you enable injectivity, how you do then, during the injection, the operations, the monitoring, but as well with the end in mind, how are you actually going to handle the remediation? So how are you going to safely close the CO2 off so it can be stored for a long time period? And with that, you need one main capture, one main basin, and there's risk management. This is the main red line that kind of connects us. Now, let me go a little bit more in detail to say, okay, how can we apply learnings that we already have seen with the current projects? So I'm going to go into detail to the element of containment and integrity. And with that, you need to apply, again, another process. And it is something not that is already readily available, it's something new with integrating the learnings that we already have with the development of wells and production, but then invert it and apply it for a CO2 injection. Now with that, what we did is, how can you identify an opportunity? You can make an assessment that stakeholders understand in relation to the criteria, if it is actually a suitable storage solution, and then actually go further with a fit-for-purpose solution during the select phase, so you can kind of develop that further out towards the details that are needed to safely execute it and operate it in the end. And with that, then you also have your storyline together that you later on have to utilize to say, here is your CO2 stored, you're going to deliver that back to the state, and it is done in the safe way and through the models that we have adjusted and calibrated towards that CO2 injection. So all these phases, but also the persons and the functions that are behind it, enable safe maturation of CCS opportunities and have a sustainable asset that especially after a particular life cycle, can then actually, with a particular transparency, indicate how the CO2 is being handed back over to the state. Then I'm going to go one layer deeper. And I'm going to look further into say, okay, how do you work together? And then this is a Wells example, between the different disciplines to work towards a very transparent way of storing that CO2. And one of the main risks that we have, because containment normally in the subsurface is already provided, especially with depleted gas fields, because once we were able to safely have hydrocarbons in that subsurface, so the containment is actually a pretty straightforward story. But the well integrity, so pretty much the straws that we've put into this particular reservoir, is a potential risk that we really need to be transparent on. And that's where we need others and other stakeholders to be very open about, yeah, this is a suitable storage, or it's not because of the way this particular field was developed to enable hydrocarbon production, and then it's not suitable for CO2 injection. And that distinction has to be clear. This is then one of the ways that you can do that, but I want to highlight one thing, especially during the assess and select phase, is what we would call a plumbing diagram. And that is really one kind of paint the picture kind of way to illustrate, yeah, this is an opportunity or it is not. And just like in the previous presentation, you see that with all these wells going into the reservoir, it can be very complex, but we need to explain that in the most simple way. This is one of those pictures. This is a plumbing diagram where you clearly indicate how the balance is between the facility, how wells are going into the reservoir, where you want to close it off on the top, but also on the bottom. Because we want to have a clear storyline how the CO2 is going to be contained within that reservoir. Now, because it's pretty much a pressure challenge, we utilize pore pressure frac gradients to indicate clearly, for example, with a methane CH4 gradient, how this actually is contained with a primary cap rock and a secondary cap rock, so that we actually have already two barriers from the top, but also from the bottom, where we contain the CO2 if we are able to inject it. So this is an example of a plumbing diagram. But then, of course, you have to go one layer deeper, because this is not enough. We want to be able to clearly indicate how that is for each particular well, because each well is a weak link in your storage. And then the story comes really forward to say, okay, how is that well positioned within the overall complex? And then you would like to clearly indicate, okay, we are injecting the CO2 in that reservoir. It has no way to go vertically or horizontally or in a downward motion, and we know that it's going to be contained within that reservoir. And even if that still occurs, especially because of certain legacy issues in wells associated with well integrity, we want to know what are the secondary containments to make sure that if, for whatever reason, we have not identified a leak path, that we actually have still on containment and we have no negative impacts of the CO2. Now, with that, we need to apply that risk management, but also look at opportunities to apply through process safety the learnings and the best practices that we're going to develop. And that is an ongoing story. So with that, there are opportunities to share knowledge, but also to develop the current technologies that we need for each unique storage complex, and develop those then recommended practices and apply flow assurance and process safety so that we actually have a full picture of what actually what the risk, but also the opportunities are for that particular storage complex. So what I would like to really point out is there are particular P&A requirements that we need to transparently communicate to our stakeholders, because that enables containment and remediation. So coming back to those elements that I already indicated earlier. It's the same with the uniqueness of our well requirements for CO2, because CO2 is a little bit of a different animal than hydrocarbons. And then, of course, your completions design, because we would like to reuse existing wells. And then, of course, prepare our people out in the field during operations that they understand what our barriers and isolation methods are, so they can do it in a safe manner. And that is kind of with the end in mind. And that's where I would say we really have to work together, work through the processes where you have now hopefully here maybe more of a practical approach, but that is not just a silver bullet, it is something that needs to be adapted to the uniqueness of your storage complex. And then I will finish with that. I think we are able to safely do this. We can mature particular CCS opportunities, but use that as a solution towards our challenge of climate. But after that as well, have a sustainable asset and provide transparency in that handover in relation to the CO2 that is stored and that is going to be returned to society, to the state. So I'll leave it with that, and knowing as well that that is just kind of giving you an explanation of 2 elements out of 3. I've indicated containment, I've indicated well integrity, but a third one is really seismic. And Gloria is going to pretty much explain that storyline in the next presentation. So with that, thank you, and appreciate it that you were here to listen.